Hello YouTube, this is DVD Review Studios here, and today I shall be doing a review on the so-called Family Guy movie, Stewie Griffin the Untold Story, which I've been looking to revisit Family Guy for quite a while, and as of late I've found a lot of the classic episodes to be both really memorable reminiscing on them, and also very quotable.
Volcano insurance.
Go on.
In particular in certain friendship groups, and this has given me the urge to binge some of the earlier seasons, which to be honest I probably haven't watched properly in about 8 years, maybe even longer, at the very least since I started collecting these season box sets when I first began the channel, so it's been that long since I've properly delved into some of these episodes, and looking back on when I first started watching the show, this movie was, funnily enough, my introduction to Family Guy. It was the first thing of Family Guy that I ever watched. I actually watched this over at a friend's house when I was a lot younger, who really bigged up the movie to be the best movie ever made, really sold it to me as something very coveted, literally like a sort of movie 43 kind of scenario, even with like warning messages on the menu screen for the DVD set saying it contains explicit content, etc., not to be viewed by anyone under 17. And it was just kind of crazy to look back on this movie and revisiting this now. It holds up really well, and that's why I just wanted to make a brief video looking into the so-called movie, as it would be. Anyhow, for those that are unfamiliar, this is essentially just a straight-to-DVD movie released in, I believe, September 2005, and this was part of the revival run of Family Guy, and it wasn't anything too special as far as what this as a product actually is, but it does hold a firm memory for me personally, as it was my introduction to the series. But if you did not know, Family Guy was actually cancelled twice in its early years. The first cancellation was done after the first sort of initial run of the show, and then it was renewed for one sort of final run almost. And then, due to mixed sort of facts blaming the show's sort of lack of popularity and I guess kind of difficult time slot Fox placed it at, it was cancelled once again. I guess the latter reason being a little bit more believable. It wouldn't be the first time Fox has mishandled a show with great potential. Connecting the dots, the intro to this film is genuinely quite clever. It's almost sort of fourth wall breaking to an extent, and it basically just feels like the show is being brought back by this film, which may not necessarily be true. The revival run, to my knowledge, came out prior to the Stewie Griffin the Untold Story. But regardless, it's great to see this as almost like a screening event for the grand return, following the show's time off the air, as we see the popular characters from the show make a reappearance. Of course, including the Griffin family as well, who arrive for the red carpet premiere of the Family Guy movie.
Stewie, good to have you back.
Good to be back.
And there was also an edited version of this movie as a sort of finale to the revival season, and this was made up of 3 episodes that were released individually in their own edited segments. And supposedly this cut the runtime down to approximately 66 minutes, with several changes making these episodes more accessible. That's why I've been saying movie, with the quotation marks done with the fingers there throughout this entire video.
Like this movie, Stewie Griffin, The Untold Story? It's not a movie at all, Brian.
But anyway, as we do look at the movie/episodes themselves, I will be referring to a couple of the changes they've made throughout. And the first part of this film is titled Stewie Be Good, which is my personal favourite of the 3 segments. With the movie introduction, it does feel like one of the Road to episodes, which are some of my personal favourite episodes from the entire series. And this begins with the swimming pool plotline, which I appreciate how this is basically the catalyst for the entire adventure that unfolds, where Stewie takes swimming lessons where he ends up in a bizarre kind of rivalry with another child, which then, with him plotting revenge, shows him facing a near-death experience that changes his outlook on life. The irony of this being that when Stewie does decide to try and improve his behaviour, Brian is straight away the first person to point out how false Stewie is behaving, and I love how this plot goes in tandem with the side plot, in relation to Peter Griffin, with this becoming an iconic part of his character, where he is recognised for being able to rant organically on the spot about more or less anything, which turns into a job for the Channel 5 news channel with a segment called You Know What Really Grinds My Gears. And I love how this progresses with a bizarre kind of rivalry between Peter and Tom Tucker. And connecting these plot points together, Stewie tries to find solace in appreciating life and controlling his actions. And taking a bad example from Brian, he thinks that drinking is the answer to his problems. And so when Brian discovers that Stewie has been drinking, he decides to teach him a lesson, allowing Stewie to drink more than ever before, which I guess is the equivalent of catching someone smoking and then saying, smoke a whole carton of cigarettes, and trying to teach him a lesson that way with tough love, as it would be, only for Stewie to drink and drive and crash into the drunken clown with Brian's car. This was honestly one of the more sort of subtle laugh-out-loud moments for me. It was very unexpected. And coincidentally, Tom Tucker is at the Drunken Clam while this happens, and he decides to use the car crash as a form of blackmail to expose Peter's negligence as a father, which causes Peter to lose his new job, which is kind of a shame, but it does obviously reset things to an extent. Tom Tucker is now happy with the rivalry now over, with him now being reinstated in his job position since he was initially fired, but yeah, interesting kind of dynamic that came to a very sudden close, in my honest opinion, with the segments of this episode, I guess you could term it as at this point, wrapping up where Stewie vows to never drink again, which takes us on to the next segment named Bango Was His Name-O. This is where things get all the more complicated for Stewie, who is still searching for answers and trying to find himself, very much in a philosophical way, which cuts to the family purchasing a TiVo device that can pause and forward live television, and I love the visual gag that avoids any sort of verbal exposition for how this feature actually works.
Easy as pie is how it works.
And this is where Stewie spots a man on TV who bizarrely looks like an older version of himself, and you can probably tell where this is going. So Stewie is convinced at first that this person that he's seen on TV is his biological father, and that he could have never been related to Peter, and this is where he insists on finding this stranger, where we see him struggle through several sort of money-making schemes in order to buy a plane ticket to take him over to San Francisco, where he believes he will meet his real dad. Beyond this main plot, I found a lot of this second act to be quite slow in all honesty, but still somewhat enjoyable. There are some very fun cutaways featured throughout, plus having Quagmire incorporated into the story driving the Winnebago sort of camper van worked to the advantage of getting Stewie to San Francisco much quicker. I also felt that the B-plot was kind of repetitive and uninteresting, where Peter and Lois feel that they need more alone time to be subtle, and since they appear to be interrupted quite a lot by Chris and Meg, they each attempt to prepare them both for the dating world. And so concluding the second act, after a difficult journey, Stewie does make it to San Francisco and confronts his doppelganger, which is essentially what he is, where the big reveal is that the man is Stewie. And in comparison to the broadcast version, the DVD edition is much more enjoyable for this big reveal. In the televised version, this was basically a big cliffhanger with like a soap opera style ending, cheapening the reveal of who this man's identity was.
How do you know my name? Because I'm not your father. I'm you.
Could this man really be Stewie?
And so wrapping this up with the third segment, Stu and Stewie's Excellent Adventure, we have another minor change to the broadcast version in comparison to the DVD release, that being this very weird sort of 24-inspired parody intro, which catches up the audience on the previous installments of the Untold story. But with the movie version, it cuts straight to the realization where Stu, the older version of Stewie, reveals that he is a time traveler on vacation in the past. And this episode in particular encapsulates a lot of clever humor, mainly taking advantage of the time travel scenario, as Stewie leaps into the future only to discover that he is not all that he seems. He isn't a dictator, a conqueror of the world, he's just a below-average man. And this realization really hurts him to see what he has become and be so disappointed, and I really do feel that allows us to empathize with such an impossible situation as the audience, and this heavily builds on Stewie's character and certainly adds a lot of fuel to the fire of the events yet to come. Beyond this piece of character building, the plot is simplistic enough where we have Stewie insisting on being Stu's life coach, while Stu tries to get enough money for a time travel watch with the goal of sending Stewie back to the present timeline. And throughout this sort of segment, seeing the family aged up is one of my personal favourite aspects of the movie really as a whole, utilising the coined sort of what-if style question, which is what the entire film really has been leading up to, and we see Stewie sort of seeing his future reflection as a failure, where they both place at the same time really the swimming pool accident at the beginning of the film being the point in their life where everything went wrong. And so the film wraps up very quickly with Stewie returning to the past in order to stop himself from exploding the lifeguard tower where he is successful. And so supposedly preventing the future Stu from even happening. This is basically where the film kind of ends, especially for the broadcast version. But on the DVD, we do have like an after-party style wrap on the film, which I do greatly appreciate, which kind of openly criticizes this so-called film as being part of some kind of, I guess, estranged satire maybe. It's an interesting concept as a standalone sort of piece of Family Guy media anyway, but if you've seen it regardless as the 3 sort of episodes or of this film, you'll still more or less get the same plot regardless. It's just obviously a little bit more extended and has a little bit more sort of explicit humour in the straight-to-DVD version. Overall though, I feel the film holds up really well to my surprise. It encapsulates a lot of what I really appreciated about the earlier episodes of Family Guy. A lot of the humour remains consistent throughout, and the plot is very enjoyable for a Stewie-centric story. It was definitely worth revisiting, allowing me personally to appreciate it that little bit more, and even as an introduction to the show, if you were curious about the series of Family Guy, this may even work for yourself as an introduction to the series. Here's a brief look at the DVD set for those that were curious. There's the spine of the DVD set. And there's the back, rated a 15 here in the UK for strong language and moderate sex references. Total runtime is approximately 88 minutes. And there is the DVD disc. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, be sure to leave me a like down below. Be sure to drop me a comment as well. How do you feel about Stewie Griffin the Untold story? And for more content, be sure to subscribe to my YouTube channel, DVD Review Studios.
Are you threatening me?